The war had burned through the stars for so long that many had forgotten how it even began. Worlds had turned to ashes, fleets had vanished into the cold blackness, and entire species had grown up knowing nothing but fear and hatred. It was called the Galactic Rift War, a conflict so wide and deep that peace seemed like a fairy tale from an ancient past. And then, a human appeared. His name was Rian, a man from a small blue planet on the edge of the galaxy. He was not a general, not a leader of armies, and not a man born into power. Yet somehow, through courage and reason, he stopped the unending bloodshed when no one else could. Rian had come to the galaxy as part of a diplomatic team from Earth. The humans were new to the stars, still learning how to live among alien empires far older and stronger than themselves. Most aliens saw humans as weak, fragile creatures, too emotional, too unpredictable, and too small to matter. But Rian changed that view forever. The war had been between two great powers, the Vorkal Empire, known for its mighty fleets and warrior culture, and the Trallian Union, famous for its advanced technology and cold precision. For decades, both sides had fought across hundreds of systems, neither willing to stop, even as their people starved and their worlds crumbled. Rian had been caught in the middle when his diplomatic ship was attacked by mistake. Instead of fleeing, he went directly into the conflict. He studied both sides, learned their languages, and risked his life traveling between enemy lines. He saw that both sides were trapped in pride. No one wanted to appear weak by talking of peace first. So Rian did what humans had always done best. He improvised. He created a plan that seemed impossible. He convinced both sides to meet on a neutral planet, under a promise that no weapon would be fired. When they arrived, he locked down their ships using an old human trick, an electromagnetic pulse that disabled both fleets equally. No one could run, no one could fight. Then he stood alone before two of the most feared commanders in the galaxy and spoke simple words. You can destroy each other forever, or you can listen for 1 hour. After that, if you still want war, I will not stop you. No one had ever spoken to them that way. They were used to fear, not honesty. But Rian's courage, his calm voice, and the strange human way of speaking from the heart broke something inside them. For the first time in years, they listened. For days, he worked without rest. He translated, negotiated, and even drew peace plans on the floor with bits of metal and sand. When both commanders finally agreed to a truce, the stars themselves seemed to sigh with relief. The Galactic Rift War was over, not because of fleets or power, but because of one human who refused to give up. When peace spread, stories about Rian went across the galaxy. Some called him the silent diplomat. Others called him the fool who tamed the stars. Whatever they called him, one thing was clear. He had changed history. It wasn't long before Rian received a message from the Vorkal king, the ruler of the most feared species in the war. The Vorkal were tall, armored beings with skin like polished stone and eyes that glowed faintly in the dark. Their empire stretched across half the galaxy. They respected strength above all else, and yet, the king himself requested to see the small human who had brought peace. Rian accepted the invitation, though many warned him not to go. Vorkal do not invite guests, one diplomat said. They summon enemies or prisoners. But Rian smiled softly. Then maybe it's time they meet a friend. The crystal palace of Zalthor, the Vorkal homeworld, stood like a mountain made of light. Shimmering towers reached into the sky, glowing with silver and violet energy. When Rian's small transport ship landed, thousands of alien eyes watched him. Some whispered, some glared, but most simply stared at the human who had done what none of their generals could. Rian walked through the grand hall with steady steps. The floor beneath him was made of transparent crystal, showing rivers of energy flowing below. The air hummed with power. He was led by royal guards to a massive chamber, where the king sat on a throne of black metal, surrounded by advisors and nobles. The king was an enormous figure, with broad shoulders, deep crimson skin, and eyes like twin suns. His voice echoed through the hall when he spoke. You are the human who ended our war. Rian bowed slightly. I did what anyone should have done. The king studied him in silence. You speak boldly. Few would stand before me without trembling. I have seen too much fear, Rian replied gently. It solves nothing. A murmur spread through the hall. The nobles exchanged uneasy glances. They expected arrogance or submission, but Rian gave neither. The king's deep laugh filled the chamber. You are unlike any being I have met, human. Your world must raise strange heroes. Ryan smiled a little. Maybe not heroes, Your Majesty. Just people who try to make things better. The king nodded slowly. You have saved my people. You brought peace where there was only fire. Such deeds must be rewarded. Whispers filled the hall again. A human being rewarded by the king of Vorkal was unheard of. Rian did not know what to say. He had not done any of this for gifts or honor. I need no reward, Your Majesty. Ryan said honestly. Seeing peace is enough. The king's golden eyes narrowed slightly as if testing him. No reward? Ryan shook his head. Peace was the only thing I wanted. For a long moment the king was silent. Then slowly a faint smile crossed his stern face. You are wise. But even wisdom deserves a gift. I will choose it myself. He rose from his throne. The floor trembled with his steps. Tomorrow you will receive your reward. Until then, rest in the guest quarters. You are under royal protection. Ryan bowed respectfully, though a flicker of confusion passed through his mind. He did not know what kind of reward a warrior king might give, but he trusted his heart and remained calm. That night, the alien city outside the palace glowed like a sea of living gems. From his high balcony, Rian looked out across Zalthor. The Vorkal people were celebrating the end of the war. Lights danced across the skies and music unlike anything human filled the air. For the first time, he saw them not as enemies or soldiers, but as people. Parents, children, families just trying to live. He wondered how many of them had lost loved ones in the war. He thought about Earth and how small it must look from here. The galaxy was vast, filled with countless species, yet all seemed to share the same wish: to survive, to find peace, to feel safe. As Ryan stood quietly, a young attendant entered the room. The king has ordered a feast tomorrow morning, she said in a gentle voice. He will present your reward then. Ryan thanked her politely. Tell His Majesty that his kindness honors me. When the attendant left, Ryan sat by the window, his thoughts deep and still. He had seen the worst of war, and now he stood among the stars wondering what came next. He didn't know that his greatest challenge and his strangest friendship was about to begin. The next day, the palace grand hall was filled again. Nobles from across the empire gathered to see what kind of reward the human would receive. Some whispered that he might be given ships. Others said he would receive land or a mountain of gems. When Ryan entered, the king rose and raised his hand for silence. Human, the king said in a strong voice. You brought peace when all else failed. You reminded my people of honor. For that I give you something more valuable than any jewel or throne. He turned toward the side doors, and they opened slowly. A tall figure walked in, dressed in a pilot's uniform, her silver hair tied back, her bright amber eyes full of defiance. She looked nothing like the calm nobles around her. Her movements were confident, almost rebellious. The king spoke again, his tone both proud and tired. This is my daughter, Princess Liren. You will be her guide, her teacher, her companion. She will learn from you what it means to have human strength, not of muscle, but of heart. The hall gasped. Ryan blinked, uncertain if he had heard correctly. The king's daughter? Liren folded her arms and frowned. I don't need a guide. The king's eyes flashed, but Ryan simply smiled. Then perhaps we will both learn something new. The king gave a slow nod. Then it is settled. Human, your reward is not gold or power, but a challenge worthy of you. Teach my daughter the meaning of peace. And as the great doors closed behind them, Rian realized that ending the war had been the easy part. What lay ahead, a journey with a fiery alien princess, might just be the adventure that would test his soul. The news spread through the palace like wildfire. The human who ended the war had been given the king's own daughter as a student and companion. To many in the Vorkal Empire, this sounded like madness. Why would the proud king trust a fragile human with something so precious? And to Princess Liren, the proud daughter of a mighty ruler, it felt like an insult. She was no ordinary royal. She had led soldiers into space battles, flown ships faster than her father's best pilots, and even disobeyed direct orders to save civilians during the war. She had always followed her own path, and she was proud of it. Now to be given as a reward to a small, quiet human, it felt like a punishment. Rian, however, didn't treat it that way. When he met her again in the royal gardens later that day, he smiled politely and said, I suppose we'll be traveling together. Liren crossed her arms, her sharp amber eyes staring into his calm brown ones. You may have fooled my father, human, but you won't control me. Rian didn't flinch. I don't want to control you. I just want to help, she laughed, a cold, short laugh. Help? I've commanded fleets since before your species learned to fly in space. Rian nodded gently. Maybe. But you still have something to learn. How to live in peace. That made her frown. Peace is for the weak. Rian tilted his head slightly. Or maybe peace is for the strong, because it's harder to keep peace than to fight. Liren opened her mouth to argue but found no words. He bowed slightly. We start tomorrow. Your father asked me to guide you. I don't plan to fail. And with that he walked away, leaving her standing among the glowing trees, unsure whether to be angry or curious. The next morning, Rian met her at the landing bay. A small starship waited for them, an old cargo vessel, patched and weathered. It was clearly not fit for royal comfort. Liran's face showed disbelief. This is the ship we're using? Rian smiled. Yes, it's simple, but it works. We don't need luxury to learn. She raised an eyebrow. You're serious, he nodded. Completely. Let's go. As the engines hummed to life, Liren sighed and sat beside him in the cockpit. You could have at least chosen a ship with better shields. Rian chuckled softly. Sometimes it's not the ship that keeps you safe. It's the pilot. She turned to glare at him, but he didn't even look her way. He was focused on the flight path ahead, calm and steady as always. Their first destination was a small planet called Terran, once destroyed by the war, but now slowly rebuilding. The Vorkal had abandoned it years ago, leaving behind burned villages and broken machines. When they landed, the air was dry, and the ground was covered in ash. Small groups of survivors, humans and aliens, were working together to repair what was left. Rian greeted them warmly. We've come to help. The locals bowed slightly but looked uncertain at the sight of the royal symbol on Liran's jacket. The king's daughter, one whispered. What would she want here? Liran looked uncomfortable. She had never been among common people before. She didn't know how to talk to them. Rian didn't wait. He rolled up his sleeves and joined them, fixing a broken water purifier. His hands got dirty, his clothes covered in dust, but he smiled the entire time. After a moment, the people began to trust him. Children ran around, curious about the human who worked beside them. Liran watched from a distance, her arms crossed again. Finally, one of the villagers asked her, Princess, will you help too? For a second, she wanted to refuse. She was a warrior, not a worker. But then she saw Rian crouched in the dirt, teaching an alien child how to connect the purifier wires, laughing softly as the machine finally buzzed to life. Something stirred inside her. She sighed, knelt beside another purifier and began to help. Her armor got scratched, her gloves got dirty, but when the water finally flowed clear again, the villagers cheered, and for the first time in her life, Liren smiled, not the proud smirk of a soldier, but a real soft smile. Later that evening, they sat by a small campfire near the ship. The night sky was filled with stars, and the sound of laughter from the village echoed faintly in the air. Liran broke the silence. You could have ordered them to fix the machines themselves. Why did you help them? Rian shrugged lightly. Because they needed it, she frowned. But you're not their leader, he looked at her. That's why they trust me. Leaders who demand are easy to find. Leaders who care are rare. Liren stared into the fire. You speak strangely for someone so small. Rian chuckled. Small things sometimes hold the biggest meaning. She didn't answer, but deep inside she felt something changing. The human's calmness unsettled her. He had no weapons, no soldiers, no power. Yet he commanded more respect than most kings she had met. Days turned into weeks as they traveled from one world to another. Everywhere they went, Rian helped rebuild what the war had broken. He fixed machines, taught children, and spoke of unity. Liran learned to see things differently. She saw that power wasn't only in ships or weapons, it was in kindness, patience, and courage. Still, she didn't always agree with him. Once, when pirates attacked a cargo ship near a trade route, she wanted to fire on them immediately. Destroy them before they escape, she said sharply. Rian shook his head. No, they're desperate, not evil, she scowled. They're thieves. Maybe, he said, but even thieves can change. Before she could argue, Rian used his ship's communication system to contact the pirates. He offered them food and supplies if they released the hostages they had taken. To her shock, the pirates agreed. They were starving ex-soldiers trying to survive after the war. When they left peacefully, Liren looked at Ryan in disbelief. "How did you do that?" He smiled softly. "By giving them what they needed instead of what they feared." She looked out at the stars. "You're strange, human." "Maybe," he said, "but sometimes being strange helps the galaxy heal." That night, as they camped on a quiet moon, Liren couldn't sleep. She thought about all she had seen. Her father had always told her that peace was something others had to obey. But Rian showed her that peace was something you built, with hands, words, and actions. When she looked at him sitting by the ship, quietly cleaning a tool, she asked, "Why do you care so much about people who owe you nothing?" Rian looked up at the stars. "Because I know what it's like to feel small and helpless. When I help others, I remind myself that no one is ever truly alone." Liren said nothing, but she understood. For the first time in her life, she felt that strength could be something gentle. A few days later, they returned to Zalthor to report to the king. The palace guards bowed as they entered, surprised to see the princess covered in dust and dirt. Ryan looked the same, tired but calm. The king sat on his throne, watching them closely. "So human," he said, his deep voice echoing. "Has my daughter learned anything?" Ryan smiled faintly. "She has learned what no war could teach her." Liren looked down, not sure what to say. The king turned to her. "And you, my daughter? What do you think of your teacher now?" She hesitated. Everyone in the hall waited for her answer. Finally, she said softly, "He is different. He does not command, but people follow him. He does not fight, yet he wins hearts." The king nodded slowly. "Then perhaps he has taught you more than I expected." Ryan bowed politely. "We still have more to learn, Your Majesty." The king's sharp gaze softened. "Then continue your journey. The galaxy is full of lessons. Bring them home." As they left the throne room, Liren walked beside Ryan, quiet for a long time. Then she said, "When I first met you, I thought you were weak. But now I think you're stronger than anyone I've known." Ryan smiled. "Strength isn't about power, Liren. It's about what you do when power isn't enough." She nodded slowly, her proud heart finally beginning to understand. The galaxy outside waited, vast, wild, and full of stories. And as their small ship lifted off once more, Liren felt something new inside her. Not anger, not pride, but hope. And for Rian, that was reward enough. The stars outside the small ship looked calm, but inside life was anything but quiet. Princess Liren was slowly learning to live like an ordinary traveler. And every new day brought another lesson from Ryan, the human who never seemed to lose his patience. For weeks, they moved from one corner of the galaxy to another. The king had given Rian freedom to take Liren anywhere, to teach her whatever he thought she needed to learn. Ryan took that mission seriously. Their ship, the Solace, was small but reliable. Liren had never traveled in such simplicity before. She had grown up in warships full of guards, servants, and luxury. Now she slept on a hard bunk, fixed engine panels with her own hands, and ate plain meals that Ryan cooked himself. At first, she hated it. One morning, she sat in the cockpit with crossed arms, watching Rian work on the control system. "Why do you do all this yourself? You could just order someone to fix it." Rian smiled without looking up. "Because doing something with your own hands teaches you more than giving an order." She frowned. "That sounds like something a teacher would say." He nodded. "And maybe that's what I am now." She rolled her eyes. "You don't look like one." He laughed softly. "Good. That means I still have work to do." Their next stop was a colony on the moon Nirath, where both humans and Vorkal were trying to live together after the war. But the peace there was fragile. The two groups didn't trust each other yet. When the Solace landed, Ryan noticed the tension immediately. The humans stayed in their section of the settlement, while the Vorkal lived on the opposite side. Between them stood a large wall made of metal scrap, a reminder of the divide that still existed. Liren whispered, "So much for peace." Ryan nodded. "That's why we're here." They walked into the human side first. The settlers welcomed Rian, recognizing him as the man who ended the war. Children smiled and waved. But when they saw Liren, their smiles faded. Some even stepped back in fear. "She's one of them," an old man muttered. "The ones who burned our homes." Liren stiffened. She wanted to defend herself, but Ryan gently raised his hand. Let's listen before we speak. They met with the colony's leader, a tired woman named Marin. She explained that trade between the two sides had stopped. The Vorkal no longer shared water from their wells, and the humans stopped sending food. Each side blamed the other. Rian said softly, "If we want peace, someone has to take the first step." Marine sighed. "We tried. They don't trust us." Ryan looked at Liren. "Then maybe it's time they see a familiar face." Liren blinked. "You mean me?" He smiled. "Yes, you're the king's daughter. They'll listen to you." She hesitated. "They hate my people." "Then give them a reason not to," Ryan said gently. That evening, Liren crossed the wall alone. The Vorkal guards lowered their weapons in shock when they recognized her. "Princess Liren?" one said. "Why are you here?" She held her head high. "To speak with your commander." The Vorkal commander, a scarred warrior named Tornak, met her in a large tent. He bowed slightly. "We did not expect the royal family to visit," Liren said. "I came to ask why the water has stopped flowing to the human side." Tornak's eyes narrowed. "Because they stole from us first. They took food shipments." Liren frowned. "Did you see them do it?" He hesitated. "No, but then maybe someone else wants you to believe that," she interrupted. Tornak blinked, surprised at her boldness. She continued, "The humans are rebuilding just like we are. They are not our enemies anymore. My father agreed to peace. Should his soldiers break it?" The commander lowered his gaze. "No, princess." "Then open the wells," she said firmly. He nodded slowly. "Yes, princess." When she returned to the human side, Ryan was waiting. "How did it go?" She gave a small smile. "The water will flow again by morning." Ryan's face lit up. "That's wonderful." Liren looked proud but calm. "You were right. Sometimes peace just needs one person to believe in it first." Ryan nodded. "Exactly." Later that night, both sides gathered near the wall. Water flowed through the pipes again, and the settlers cheered. For the first time, humans and Vorkal shared food together. Ryan watched quietly from the edge, his heart warm. Lorraine sat beside him. "I never thought helping could feel this good." He smiled. "It's easier than fighting, isn't it?" She laughed softly. "Yes, and harder too." Over the next months, they visited many worlds together. On one planet, they helped rebuild schools destroyed in the war. On another, they planted forests where nothing had grown for decades. Liren became known not just as the king's daughter, but as the Princess of Renewal, a name that spread quietly across the galaxy. She started to see Ryan not as a strange little human, but as a friend. She learned from him every day, even when he wasn't trying to teach. Once, while repairing a damaged ship, she asked, "Ryan, do you ever miss your home?" He looked up from his tools. "Every day. But the stars are full of homes now. Every time we help someone, it feels like I find another one." Liren nodded thoughtfully. "You humans are strange," Ryan chuckled. "We hear that a lot." One day, they received a distress signal from a small medical station orbiting the gas planet Rhinar. The message said their power core was failing and they had only hours before losing life support. Rian and Liren rushed there. When they arrived, smoke filled the corridors. Alarms echoed through the station. Ryan grabbed a toolkit and ran toward the power chamber. "Liren, check on the patients." She nodded and sprinted toward the med bay. Inside, she found dozens of injured beings, humans, Vorkal, and others. The doctors were panicking. The oxygen systems were failing. Liren quickly took charge. "Everyone stay calm. Move the patients to the center hall where the air is stronger." Her voice carried command, and the others obeyed. Meanwhile, Ryan worked furiously inside the power room. Sparks flew as he tried to reconnect damaged circuits. The heat was unbearable, but he refused to stop. Sweat ran down his face as he rerouted energy lines with shaking hands. "Almost there," he muttered. Liren entered, coughing from the smoke. "Ryan, the air's getting worse," he shouted. "I need 2 more minutes." She ran to help him, pulling a cable into place despite the burns it caused on her gloves. Together they managed to restart the generator. The hum of power filled the station again. Lights flickered back on and the oxygen system stabilized. The doctors cheered. Rian leaned against the wall, breathing heavily. Liren looked at him, her face covered in soot, and smiled. "You're crazy, human." He laughed weakly. "Maybe, but it worked." When the crisis was over, the station's head doctor thanked them. "You saved everyone. How can we ever repay you? Ryan shook his head. No need. Just keep helping others. That's enough. As they left the station, Lyran turned to him. You could have died in there. He smiled calmly. So could you, she frowned. Why do you always risk your life for others? Ryan looked out the window at the glowing gas planet below. Because someone has to show that life is worth saving. Lyran was silent for a moment. Then she said softly, You make it sound so simple. He looked at her kindly. That's because it is. Weeks later, when they finally stopped on a peaceful world covered in fields of silver grass, Ryan sat under a tree, looking at the sky. Lyran joined him, sitting quietly beside him. You've changed, he said gently. She smiled faintly. Maybe. I don't feel like the same person I was when I left home. Ryan nodded. You see the galaxy differently now, she looked at him. Do you think my father will notice? He smiled. He already has. Kings always see more than they say. They sat in silence for a long time, watching a sunset that painted the horizon in gold and blue. For Lyran, the journey with Ryan had started as punishment, but now it felt like purpose. She had learned that true strength wasn't about power. It was about healing, helping and understanding. As the stars appeared one by one, she whispered, Thank you, Ryan. He turned to her, smiling softly. For what? For showing me how to see. And as night fell over the silver fields, the galaxy seemed just a little brighter, because somewhere among the endless stars, one rebellious princess had learned how to be kind. Months had passed since Ryan and Princess Lyran had begun their journey together. The galaxy had started to change because of them. Broken colonies were rebuilding, rival species were learning to trust, and children looked to them as symbols of hope. But not all change was welcome. Some in the Vorkal Empire had grown angry at the princess's new outlook. The Royal Council, proud and rigid, saw Ryan's influence as dangerous. To them, a human was unworthy of teaching a royal heir. They whispered among themselves, plotting quietly in the shadowed halls of the Crystal Palace. Their plan was subtle, yet dangerous. They intended to overthrow the king, frame Ryan as a traitor, and use the situation to tighten their grip on the empire. Meanwhile, Ryan and Lyran remained unaware of the growing threat. They returned to Zalthor on a mission from the king to inspect newly rebuilt colonies and ensure peace was being maintained. Lyran had grown in skill and confidence. She was no longer the rebellious princess who had refused to listen. She was a leader in her own right, brave, decisive, and calm in crisis. The Crystal Palace was alive with whispers as they arrived. Guards recognized them and bowed, but some eyes were wary, suspicious. The Royal Council watched from the shadows, their gazes sharp and calculating. The king greeted them warmly. You have done well, he said to Lyran. You have learned courage, compassion, and leadership. But there are lessons yet to face. Lyran nodded respectfully. We will do our best. Ryan smiled faintly. And I will help in any way I can. The king's eyes were kind but serious. Good. For soon a test will come, one that measures not only your strength but your heart. Lyran felt a twinge of unease. She had faced battles before, but this was different. This test would not be against enemies outside, but threats from within her own palace. That night, as Ryan and Lyran rested in their quarters, the first signs of danger arrived. A group of council members moved through the palace using secret passageways that only they knew. They had small blaster-like devices and careful steps. Their plan was to attack the king during a ceremony and frame Ryan as the instigator. But Lyran had noticed something unusual earlier in the day. A strange message had been delivered to her quarters, warning her to trust no one except Ryan. The note had no sender, only a single mark resembling the king's seal. She shared it quietly with Ryan. Someone is planning something, she said. Ryan studied her face. Then we must be ready. Trust your instincts, they are sharper than mine. The night passed slowly. Both stayed awake, preparing quietly. By morning, the palace buzzed with anticipation. Today, the king would hold a ceremony to honor the heroes of the galaxy, the humans and Vorkal who had rebuilt peace together. The grand hall gleamed under the morning light. Crystals reflected the sun, sending beams across the polished floor. Guests from across the empire had gathered. Diplomats, warriors, and nobles stood in rows. Ryan and Lyran entered together. Laren wore her ceremonial jacket, now worn with the marks of her travels, her hair tied back simply. She looked nothing like the fragile princess some had expected. The king rose, his deep voice echoing. Today we honor those who bring hope to the galaxy. Let all who hear this remember that courage and wisdom shine brighter than weapons. As applause filled the hall, a sudden explosion rocked the chamber. Smoke filled the room, alarms sounded, and the council's betrayal became clear. Hidden blasters fired from the balconies, aiming to capture the king. Rian immediately stepped forward. His instincts were sharp, his movements precise. He dodged the first blast, moving toward the king's side. Liren reacted without hesitation. "Protect my father," she shouted to the guards. The hall became chaos. Nobles ran, diplomats ducked, and Ryan shielded the king from another burst of fire. Sparks flew across the crystal floors and alarms blared. Liren didn't falter. She used her knowledge of the palace to move through secret corridors, guiding the guards to intercept the traitors. Her calm, decisive voice cut through the panic. "Hold your ground! Don't fire at the wrong target." Ryan, meanwhile, faced the main council members who had betrayed the king. They were strong, experienced warriors, but Ryan had learned much from traveling the galaxy. Using careful movements and strategic thinking, he disarmed them without lethal force. Liren entered at just the right moment. She had anticipated their positions and blocked their escape routes. Together, human and princess moved like a single force, precise and unyielding. One of the conspirators shouted, "The human is working with them." Liren turned sharply. "No, he has protected my father." She fought with strength and skill, disarming another member of the council. The guards, inspired by her courage, regained their composure and moved against the traitors. Within minutes, the attackers were contained. Ryan checked on the king, who was unharmed but visibly shaken. Liren had stood at his side, her hands steady, her eyes unwavering. The king looked at both of them with deep pride. "You have passed the test," he said. "Not through force alone, but through courage, wisdom, and trust. Today you showed what it truly means to lead." Ryan helped the king to a chair. Liren stood tall, dusted off her jacket, and gave a small nod to Ryan. He smiled faintly. After the crisis, the hall was cleared, and the king spoke to everyone present. "Let this be known. A human and my daughter have defended the empire. Their courage is a lesson for all. Strength is not only in arms, it is in heart, in thought, and in unity." The crowd erupted in applause, now fully understanding the human's role in the empire. For the first time, whispers of doubt about Rian disappeared. The citizens saw him as a true hero, worthy of honor and trust. Liren stood beside him. Guards and nobles alike now respected her not only for her birthright but for her bravery. She had learned to balance pride with compassion, strength with wisdom. That night, Ryan and Liren walked through the palace gardens. The stars reflected off the crystal ponds, creating a calm, peaceful light. Liren finally spoke. "I never thought I could face danger like that and remain calm." Ryan looked at her. "You didn't face it alone. Leadership is not about fighting alone, it's about knowing who to trust." She smiled softly. "I trust you, Ryan. You've taught me more than I thought a human could." He shook his head lightly. "You taught yourself. I only helped you see it." Liren looked up at the stars. "Do you think my father knows how much I've changed?" "He does," Ryan said calmly. "He saw it the moment you made the first choice to trust him, to trust yourself and to trust others. That is why he gave you to me in the first place." The princess nodded. For the first time, she felt the full weight of her journey. It had not been easy, but she understood now that strength was not the ability to command. It was the ability to protect, guide, and inspire others. Days later, the king called them both into his private chambers. He looked at Liren with eyes full of pride. "You have faced betrayal, danger, and fear. You acted not with anger or pride, but with courage and wisdom. Your father's empire has never seen a princess like you." Liren bowed. "Thank you, father." Then the king turned to Ryan. "And you, human. You risked yourself to protect my daughter and my throne. You are more than a visitor. You are part of this empire now. Your wisdom, courage, and heart are an example to all. For that, I honor you as guardian of the empire." Ryan bowed humbly. "I only did what I could, your majesty." The king shook his head with a smile. "And yet it was enough to inspire hope, loyalty, and courage. You have shown that a single human can change the fate of many." Liren watched silently, her chest swelling with pride and gratitude. Ryan had become not only her teacher but a companion she deeply respected. The palace was alive with celebrations that night. Music filled the halls and people from every corner of the empire came to honor the heroes. Yet in the quiet of the observation deck, Ryan and Liren watched the stars in silence. "You think it's over?" Liren asked. Ryan shook his head. "The galaxy is never quiet for long. But today we did something good," she nodded. "I understand now. Strength isn't just in power. It's in choices, in protecting others, and in trusting the right people." Ryan smiled. Exactly. They stood together looking out at the vast galaxy. It stretched endlessly before them, full of worlds still in need, of stories waiting to be written, of lives waiting to be touched. And in that moment, Liren knew that their journey was far from over. But she also knew this: whatever came next, she was ready. Not as a princess, not as a daughter, but as a leader, a protector, and a human ally's trusted companion. The galaxy had tested them, challenged them, and shown them the depths of danger. And yet, through it all, they had emerged stronger, united and ready to face whatever came next. For the first time, both human and princess felt the true weight of hope and the promise of a better future. The war had ended months ago, but its echoes still lingered in the galaxy. Ships traveled cautiously along trade routes. Colonies worked tirelessly to rebuild, and old grudges whispered in quiet corners. Yet a new story had begun, one of hope, courage, and unity, and it was led by a human named Ryan and a princess named Liren. The king of the Vorkal Empire had officially named Ryan Guardian of the Empire, a title no human had ever received. It was not just an honor, it was a symbol of trust, a statement that humans could be equals among the stars. But Ryan cared little for titles. For him, the reward had always been the chance to help, to teach, and to see others grow stronger. Liren, on the other hand, had grown into her role in ways even her father had not imagined. No longer the rebellious princess who refused guidance, she had become a symbol of change. She combined the fierce determination of the Vorkal with the compassion and wisdom Ryan had shown her, and now she was ready to lead. The morning air on Zalthor shimmered with crystalline light, as Ryan and Liren prepared to leave for the first joint mission as the new ambassadors of peace. Ships lined the landing bay, carrying supplies, engineers, and teachers ready to travel to newly rebuilt colonies. Humans and Vorkal worked side by side, their laughter and chatter filling the air, a sound that had once been unimaginable. Liren adjusted her jacket and looked at Ryan. "Do you think everyone will accept us this time?" Ryan smiled gently. "They will if we show them that unity is stronger than fear. People follow actions, not words," she nodded thoughtfully. "Then let's make them believe." Together, they boarded the Solace, their small but reliable starship, and lifted into the sky. The engines hummed, carrying not just a human and a princess, but the hopes of many worlds. Their first stop was a human colony called Arendor, a planet that had been abandoned during the war. When they arrived, the settlement seemed fragile. Buildings were patched with metal and stone, and smoke still rose from small fires used for cooking. Children played in the streets, but their laughter was cautious. Ryan stepped forward, greeting the colony leaders. "We've come to help rebuild," he said simply. The leaders looked surprised. They had heard of Ryan, of course, but seeing him in person, standing calmly beside the Vorkal princess, inspired trust. Liren disembarked, her armor scratched and worn from previous missions. Children stared at her with wide eyes, unsure whether to fear or admire her. She knelt to greet them. "I'm Princess Liren. You don't need to be afraid. We're here to help." The children laughed nervously, then ran to show her their small gardens, their patched homes, and their clever machines built from scrap. Liren walked through the colony, her sharp eyes noticing every detail. She taught them small repairs, helped distribute food, and encouraged cooperation between the humans and Vorkal who had returned to help. Ryan watched her quietly. The once rebellious princess had become a leader who inspired through action, not fear. Over the next few days, Ryan and Liren worked tirelessly. They traveled between villages, rebuilt water systems, repaired broken starships, and mediated disputes. Every action they took strengthened the bonds between species, and every choice they made demonstrated that humans could be heroes in ways that were different, yet equally valuable to the galaxy's mighty warriors. One afternoon, A small Vorkal ship approached with urgent news. A pirate group had attacked a trade convoy, taking supplies and threatening to destabilize the region. Ryan and Lyran acted quickly. Lyran climbed into the cockpit, her hands steady on the controls. We can't destroy them, they'll only fight back harder. But we can stop them without bloodshed. Ryan nodded. Exactly. We'll outsmart them. Using a combination of strategy, navigation skills, and clear communication, they managed to intercept the pirates. Instead of attacking directly, Ryan broadcast a message offering food and water in exchange for the convoy's safe return. The pirates, exhausted and desperate, agreed without conflict. When the convoy was returned safely, Lyran turned to Ryan. You make it seem easy, but it's not. He shook his head. It's simple if you care about more than winning. Winning at the cost of life isn't a victory. Lyran smiled faintly. She was learning that strength came not only from combat, but from wisdom, patience, and understanding. After the mission, they returned to Zalthor for a council meeting. The king had summoned them to report on the state of the colonies. Tell me, the king said, his eyes glowing faintly in the crystal light. How do you judge success? Ryan replied. By the number of lives touched, not by the number of enemies defeated. The king nodded, a deep smile forming. Then you have done well. And my daughter? Lyran stepped forward. I've learned that courage is not only in fighting, but in helping. Strength is not measured by power, but by the change you make. The king's eyes glistened with pride. Then my empire is safe, and the galaxy has hope. That evening, Ryan and Lyran stood on a high balcony overlooking the glowing city. Ships moved in the sky, carrying aid and rebuilding materials to far-off colonies. The galaxy, once divided by fear and war, was slowly becoming a place of cooperation and hope. You think it will last? Lyran asked quietly. Ryan looked out at the stars. Peace is fragile, but it can last if people are willing to protect it. She nodded. Then we will protect it. Together they watched the lights of Zalthor shimmer like stars fall into the ground. The galaxy was vast, full of unknown worlds, challenges, and adventures. But now it seemed full of possibility. Weeks later, Ryan received a message from Earth. Humans there had been following his journey. Inspired by the tales of bravery, wisdom, and cooperation, schools were teaching children about the galaxy, about courage, and about the importance of helping others. For the first time, humans were seen not as small newcomers, but as meaningful participants in galactic affairs. Lyran looked over his shoulder as he read the message aloud. Your people. They're proud of you. Ryan shook his head. They'll be proud of all of us if we keep doing what's right. Lyran smiled. She had grown, changed, and learned from this human, not only in skill but in heart. She understood now that leadership, courage, and honor were universal traits, not limited to species or size. The next months passed quickly. Ryan and Lyran traveled further than ever before. They repaired entire sectors, mediated peace talks, and inspired young leaders from different worlds to take responsibility for their futures. Everywhere they went, their names became legends. Children told stories of the human who ended a war, and the princess who learned to lead with compassion. Adults spoke of their courage and wisdom, and through it all, Ryan remained humble. While Lyran grew into the leader her father had always hoped she would become. One night, aboard the Solace, Lyran asked quietly, Do you think my father will ever fully understand how much I've changed? Ryan smiled. He does. He has watched you grow from a child of privilege into a true leader, and he trusts you completely now. Lyran nodded. She looked out at the stars, feeling the weight of the galaxy in her chest, not as a burden, but as a responsibility she was ready to embrace. Finally, the day came when the king called them to the palace one last time. He looked at Ryan with deep respect. You came as a guest, a human with no claim to our empire. Yet you have changed more than I could have imagined. You have proven that courage and wisdom know no bounds. For that you are now truly part of this empire. Ryan bowed. Thank you, Your Majesty. I only did what anyone should have done. The king smiled. And yet it was enough to save countless lives, to heal old wounds, and to inspire hope. That is why I honor you. Then he turned to Lyran. And you, my daughter. You have grown into a leader who sees beyond pride, beyond war, beyond fear. You are ready to guide my empire and the galaxy with strength and compassion. Lyran bowed deeply. I will do my best, father. As they left the palace, Ryan and Lyran walked through the city streets. People cheered, waved, and thanked them. Ships lifted off into the sky, carrying supplies, aid, and hope. Do you ever think we'll stop? Liren asked, laughing softly. Rian shook his head. The galaxy never stops. But that's the beauty of it. There's always a chance to do good. She smiled, placing a hand on his shoulder. Then let's keep doing good together. Ryan nodded. Together, the stars stretched endlessly above them. Planets,